Hello, everybody. Welcome to another evening of Too Much Shenanigans. My name is Shannon.
And my name is Shannon, too. Well, not Shannon, too. It's just also Shannon. Ugh, sorry.
Yeah, well, I mean, you have the two N's in the middle of your name, and I have the one.
That's
so
true.
In some ways, I guess you are two. Or maybe you have three N's total, and I have two. So it's forever the who's on first
So
dilemma.
confusing. Yes.
But as you can probably tell, for this month's episode, we're going to be talking about things that kind of relate to the realm of the spooky. We are getting into the Halloween spirit.
Yes.
I wish I was so decorative like you are, Shannon. Like, I didn't think about bringing my hat to work today. But
so decorative, just me sticking my witch hat on. But, that's okay. Other than that, I'm wearing like a cardigan. Yes. Have to be, I have to be a little festive, a little spooky for this episode because that's what we'll be talking about.
Absolutely.
Also, it's my favorite holiday.
Well, all the more reason to celebrate. So,
yep.
As you all know, viewers, if you've been watching, every month we go ahead and we start off by doing a little get-to-know-you question with Shannon and I. However, if you would like to answer it from home, feel free to just throw it into the chat box there. So, for all of you St. Louisans, the question that I have chosen for this month shall come as no surprise to you, and it is, what is your favorite joke to tell, especially for Halloween? So Shannon, I know since you are not originally from St. Louis, is this a weird concept to you?
Well, I mean, so is this a St. Louis thing where everyone tells jokes on Halloween? Is that a thing?
Oh, yeah, it's a thing where you go trick-or-treating, people will ask you, oh, what's your joke? And then you have to tell a joke in order to get candy.
Oh, yeah, that's totally not a thing where I come from.
Okay. Oh, right. I didn't even know that you didn't know that this was a St. Louis customary practice.
I didn't. I had no idea that you had to tell a joke when you go trick-or-treating. Wow. So you have to do extra work here if you go trick-or-treating.
Yeah,
you don't just say trick-or-treat and get your thing. You have to tell a joke.
Yeah, wow. It's a thing. So Shannon, do you have a favorite joke?
Well, I have a joke. I don't have a favorite one, thankfully, because I was the one who wrote the joke list for the teen subscription box this month.
For the remnants of it.
I do know some Halloween jokes now. Ooh. So I did like yay, there it is. Yep. That was me, totally Google jokes. Since I obviously never needed to know a lot of Halloween jokes since I'm not from here. Mm-hmm. But I did really like the one that is, what do you get when you cross a vampire and a snowman?
I should remember this. What is it?
Bite. Get it? Frostbite?
Yeah. Frostbite. That's pretty...
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, such bad jokes. But I love it.
Jokes.
Yeah. Oh, man. My mom just told me a joke last night about, what does the janitor say when he pops out of the closet and scares you? And I don't remember what it is because I made up an answer that was totally ridiculous. And this is awful because I was going to originally use that joke. So if anybody out there Googles that joke and finds out the answer, just go ahead and give the answer to it in the chat. But my favorite joke, which has consequently the answer to it, is the handle to all of my social media type things in the world. But it's a Doctor Who joke. So what does the doctor like to eat with his spaghetti?
Well, I know what your social media handles are, so I can answer that.
Yeah, go for it if you want.
Dalek bread.
Yeah, and whenever I say this joke to people, I always have to go, Dalek bread. And people half time look at me and they don't understand what it is because they don't watch Doctor Who or know it. But I remember it was way back in high school when I heard that joke and I was like, this is my favorite joke. This is hilarious. I love garlic bread. I love Daleks. So yeah, Dalek bread is my thing now for everything.
Now I know why it's your social media handle.
You do. You have the backstory.
So now I have the backstory. Yep. Awesome.
Okay. Well, let's go ahead and let's transition and get going with talking about some spooky content. And of course, viewers, feel free to comment along the way, or if you have any questions about what we're talking about or clarifications, feel free to chat with us and we will definitely respond during the show. So, the first thing that I'm going to talk about this evening is a book that I just finished today, and it's called The Snow Fell 3 Graves Deep. Tales or voices from the Donner Party. And obviously, with the words Donner Party, my attention was grabbed when I saw this on like purchasing list like months ago. I said, yes, I have to read this. Now I know, Shannon, you have a different though like feeling when it comes to content about the Donner Party.
Just say, so I'm from Utah, and so I'm from out west, and we learn about the Donner Party. Like, I can't, like, from elementary school, it's like a thing. I don't know why, but you just like learn all about it all the time. And so for me, I'm like, oh yay, another thing about the Donner Party. Like, so yeah, but I guess, but you don't learn about it as much out here, which kind of makes sense. I guess depends on where you grow up, kind of what local history you learn about. So let's hear your reaction to the book and everything. So
so this book is written by Allan Wolf. It's a historical fiction. However, I would argue that it's closer to nonfiction than it is to fiction. Only because this book is so heavily researched. And I actually think that if the author would have like leaned in more to like the nonfiction tendencies, like this would be like an amazing nonfiction book. That being said, as far as the way it's written in the plot, not exactly the most gripping of fiction narratives. So for those of you out there who have no idea what the Donner Party is, let me give you a brief synopsis. You all probably know the Oregon Trail, and many people traveled out west, going to California to manifest destiny and all that. And the Donner Party is one group of those settlers who traveled out west. However, due to a lot of unfortunate circumstances along the way, as well as some poor leadership, they ended up being stranded in the mountains during winter, which then led them to cannibalism in order to survive. Yes, you heard that right, folks. Cannibalism. And this is like content that I don't know about all of you, but when I first heard about this, which was probably in middle school, I was like, yes, let's read about cannibals. This is the cool part of history. And I remember, I don't remember hearing about it much in like, our history classes. And yeah, probably part of it was that my teachers didn't want us to talk about cannibalism and to be researching cannibalism in class as middle schoolers. And like you said, like it's not necessarily local history. Like for us, I think it was treated kind of as one little tidbit in the Manifest Destiny story. Whereas, we here probably focus more on Lewis and Clark and talking about kind of the beginning origins of Manifest Destiny and this idea that spread. So when I saw then that this book was available, I was like, okay, yes, a story about the Donner Party. I'm ready to learn. And it was like publicized and like advertised as being a book that was a novel in verse, which okay, yeah, it kind of is. But it's also kind of a lot of other things. Like there are ads in there of like things that were actually published during the time of like newspaper articles. There are like bits of it that are more like prose, I think, than necessarily poetry. And what's interesting that I was not expecting is that one of the characters in this tale, or one of the voices, is hunger. And so when I started reading this, I was like, okay, so we're doing a personification of hunger. I wonder if they're trying to kind of do like a book thief thing. For those of you who don't know, book thief personifies death as like a narrator character. And I was like, okay, let's see how then this book does this with hunger. And because I had that comparison in my head, it was, again, okay. But it was still, like, very interesting to have just the narration style kind of break up the different bits of prose and poetry from each of the different characters. It did take a while for me to fully, like, comprehend, okay, which character is speaking now, who is who. It probably halfway through the book until I was like, okay, I got these characters down, I know what's happening. And it really does take until about half of the book, I think, to really pick up speed into this tale of horror. Because the first half is just talking about their journey out west at the beginning, and then the second half is all about them being trapped and what occurs. And that's also where I think the writing actually shows the strongest in this book, because you have these great bits and pieces. I like keep looking over here because I have the book with me still. Like you have these bits and pieces where you have a page that says the word snow at the top. And then underneath of it, like you'll have different more words that are just snow, 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 snow. And then it'll have like the name of the people who die along the way. And as the book goes on, the names keep growing like higher and higher, as does the snow, because the name of the book, the snow fell 3 graves deep, is because the snow fell like 18 feet like during this time, which is insane to think about also because I've never seen that much snow in my life. And so
really?
No, I've never seen 18 feet of snow. Like,
okay.
That's like, I don't know, like, as I was given the descriptions in the book, I think that dominant impression of, like, being hungry and being cold were so well done. Especially right now as we've had some kind of cold days start to happen. Like, you feel it. Like, it was almost like a sense when I was leaving, this morning and it was cold and I was just reading this book that I was like, oh, I'm like uncomfortable. Like now I'm just thinking about like the coldness of this book and how these characters felt. And it really is just like remarkable that anybody even made it out alive for this, like in this event. I'm like, I assumed everyone died, growing up because I didn't know, like it was one blurb in a textbook. And now like it was just so interesting to read about. So I think for any viewers out there who want to know more about the Donner Party, would call themselves historians and appreciate a good historical fiction text, as far as like involving a lot of research, because this author includes like 50 pages of research at the end of like his process of like everything, and he has a lot of cool like breakdowns of timelines and characters, and it's just like it's very well done. He's also the same guy who did The Watch That Ends the Night, and it was voices from the Titanic, which was a big hit, like I guess at this point almost like a decade ago when it came out. So yeah, I would definitely say if you like history, if you want this creepy, chilling story about cannibalism, definitely read it and you will learn something. The second half of the book is much quicker to read than the first half. But if you can get past like that first initial stages of like, okay, how long are we gonna be walking here in like the Midwest? Then it'll pick up and it'll be much better.
Yeah. Well, it was a long journey, so. And
yeah,
I think that we probably learned more about it where I'm from, because it always seemed like in our history classes when we were learning about like Western history, it was like, look what your ancestors went through, like for you to be here, basically. It's like, look how hard they how hard it was for them to travel here for you to be here. And I think that's like a common thing, like a common mindset when you grow up in the West. Is like, oh, we're tough people because we, overcame, like our ancestors overcame these hardships, and now we live in a desert. And anyway, that's my 2 cents on it.
Yeah, well,
it sounds, like an interesting book, and yeah, no, it is remarkable that some people came out alive, not unscarred, but they came out of it. So.
Yeah, definitely have their scars. This is definitely an I survived book for an older audience, I would think. So
yeah, and then I think it's funny that you've never seen 18 inches of snow.
Well,
you said 18 feet, right? No,
yeah,
18 inches.
Feet. No, 18
feet.
18 feet is what I meant. If I said 18 inches, that was me messing up.
That might have been just me hearing it, but I mean, I worked at a ski resort and we had more than that. So,
it's just like,
yeah, I mean, you guys don't get snow here, so.
Yeah, not like there, like in these stories. Like I'm just thinking of, it was just the mental imagery I had of winter during this event was just like, oh my gosh. Like I'm just shocked anyone survived to begin with. But
yeah,
let's go ahead. We can transition into your first thing, which also
Yes.
involves eating people.
It does, but not necessarily cannibalism. We'll transition from real life cannibalism to zombies. Yay! So, all right. So, I read the book Broken Lands by Jonathan Maberry. I don't know if you've heard of the Rotten Ruins series. It came out, gosh, I think maybe a decade ago. The first one did. He's like, he's really big into writing about zombies. I'm getting when I looked at the author's other work, I'm like, yeah, he just really likes zombies. So, Broken Lands came out, I think last year or maybe the year before. I can't remember now. And it is a sequel to Rotten Ruin, but not like a direct one. It can stand alone. You can read it without knowing anything that happened in the previous series. And so I had grabbed this book a couple years ago, and I finally got around to reading it this month. I was like, zombies, Halloween, it's appropriate. So, I actually really liked it. I zoomed through it. I do like how his writing style is. He writes nice short chapters.
Oh yes,
Which
is my favorite.
yes, and he breaks the book up into sections. So like this section is from this person's point of view, this section is from this person's point of view, and so it's very clear. And then within those sections, the chapters are very, like they're usually pretty short and quick, and so it makes it like like you zoom through it. And so the main character in this one, the new character, her name is Gabriella, sorry, I can't talk today. Gabriella Gutsy Gomez. She goes by Gutsy. And she goes by that nickname because she is living in a town called New Alamo. So it's been 15 years since the end, basically. So the zombie apocalypse, it's been like 15 years. She's 15 years old, so she doesn't really know anything different. The world she grew up in is the apocalyptic world of zombies. And so she lives in this town called New Alamo, which you find out actually used to be an immigration detention facility in Texas. And that is why a lot of their population is Mexican American, because they were a bunch of illegal aliens being detained when the end came. And her mother was one of them. And so they called the land outside of the town the Broken Lands. So that's why it's titled Broken Lands. Like the first book in the Rotten Ruin series is titled that because for the communities in California where that kind of takes place, the outside lands out of their town they call the Rotten Ruin. So basically it's like two different names for the no man's land, basically, that is outside of civilization, where if you go out there you're probably going to get eaten by a zombie. And then it's also told from other sections are told from Ben Amura, who is the returning main character from the Rotten Ruin series. He also is one of the narrators. Well, they're not necessarily narrators. It's told from third person, but it's from like their point of view. And it's nice because they kind of summarize what happened in the previous series. I mean, not like totally in depth, but you get the impression of like what happened to them and where the people are coming from. So like I didn't feel lost or anything like that, which was nice. So it's like you can pick up this book without ever having read the first Rotten Ruin series and know kind of what's going on in this world. And they end up, so the two characters, they all end up eventually converging. Their paths converge. And I liked it because it has, it really focuses on character more than it focuses on like the apocalypse or things going around or what's going on with zombies. It really focuses on the characters and their emotions and the psychological toll growing up in the apocalypse has on you. And I also liked his interesting take on how the outbreak started. So what it was is it's a parasite that was developed during the Cold War by the Russians, and it was meant to be a parasite that would take over like the host, and then the host would go crazy, like, you know, they'd become a zombie, they'd die, become the living dead, but they would still have like this need to eat protein, so they would obviously want to eat people, and that would spread it. But then the parasite had a normal lifespan, so then eventually the parasite would die, and then the person would, you know, like die, and, you know, like it would be, so it was like the perfect biological weapon for warfare, because it would take out all the people but leave everything else standing, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But this Russian scientist defected to the United States, and so he defects to the United States. He brings the parasite with him, and for some reason, he decides that he's going to adjust it to be, because he's got this thing like he wants to punish serial killers even more. So he adjusts the parasite so that it will make the person completely aware of their body decomposing while they're in their coffin. So that was his idea of like punishing the serial killer, is that you would be conscious but not be able to control your body, and you would feel you like decomposing. And I was like, what?
Yeah, that's awful.
Right? And so that serial killer becomes the first zombie.
Yay, serial killer zombie.
Yeah, right. And so he gives him this parasite. He wakes up before the end of the funeral, and then you know how it goes from there with zombie apocalypse. So one of the things that is really horrifying about that is to think that the zombie would be the person who used to be, like, you know, they're conscious, they just can't control their body. And so it's like they're aware that they're a zombie. And I'm like, that is like one of the most awful things that I've ever read. So yeah. So that's right? I was like, that's awful. So it's a really good book. It really focuses on character. The plot is mainly, you know, defending your home, finding out what these shadowy old government agents are doing, and then there's a big zombie army. So, yeah. I mean, there's lots going on. It ends on a cliffhanger because there is a sequel. The sequel is out. I haven't read it yet. But we do have it at the library, and I believe there's probably going to be a third one. Who knows if there'll be even more than that, because I think Rotten Ruin has 4 or 5 books.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I know. And so, yeah, I mean, there was one thing that I had an issue with it, was that, so they said, like, you know, during the apocalypse, they dropped nuclear bombs and stuff on different cities to try to contain the outbreak, and so there's radiation, and so, like, some of these people, you would think they'd have radiation sickness, but they don't. But then they, like, are saying the radiation and chemicals have made the wildlife mutate, and I'm just like, 15 years? I'm not sure. Like, it was hard for me to, like, suspend my disbelief that in 15 years suddenly the wildlife would be really, really mutated like it describes. I don't know. That's just me. But yeah, I mean, other than that, like, it's funny because I really love this book and I love zombie books, but I can't watch zombie movies or TV shows. So that's my weird thing with zombies. Like, I love zombie books, and this is actually a really good one because I've read more than one zombie book. I've read several. But yeah, if you want me to watch The Walking Dead or something like that, that's not going to happen because I'll have nightmares. And I don't know why it's like that.
That is very interesting. I also will say that, like, as far as nightmares go, like, growing up, I cannot tell you how many nightmares I had that was based in, like, zombies coming after me or something. So I think there's probably some psychological thing to explore there, with like some symbolism of like, what does the zombie mean in our society? But that's
I
yeah.
actually had a professor in college, an English professor. He actually wrote a book about what zombie means in society and stuff. His whole area of research was zombies.
That's amazing. I love that so much.
Yeah. So, and yeah, it's just the weirdest. I guess it's because maybe when I'm reading, the zombies can appear however I want in my head, or I can just pretend and not like look at them directly. But when they're like up there on the screen, you know, they're like in your face and they just creep me out. So there you go. I have a really weird thing where I'm like, I love zombie books. They're usually really good. And the whole zombie apocalypse thing is so interesting. But then everyone's like, yeah, so let's watch Night of the Living Dead. And I'll be like, no. So there you go. But yeah, so if you like zombies, if you know, like, basically, if you like zombies or if you like a book that's that is tense but very character driven and has some interesting lore behind it, I would highly recommend reading Broken Land.
All right.
And like I said, you don't need to read The Rotten Rune first either, so.
Perfect.
Moving on.
Yeah, so I'm going to now talk about a comic that I read on Hoopla, actually. So that's Hoopla is our source here at the library where you can go on, you can download things instantly. And this is about Harley Quinn and kind of her backstory of how she meets the Joker and falls in love with the Joker. So I don't know, Shannon, how much you know about the Batman lore and the villains.
Oh, I come from a nerd family, so you do not need to doubt that. My dad actually collects DC comic stuff, so I'm good. You probably don't need to explain very much for me.
Okay, cool. I will keep it brief then. So yeah, you know the plot of this story. And you know, this isn't the first time we've heard of people taking on this story about how does Harley Quinn, this very smart, I'm trying to remember if she's just a student or a researcher or a scientist psychologist. She's very intelligent, but how does she end up falling for a madman, this villain? And the Joker's always been one of my favorite villains growing up. Like, I don't really keep track of any superhero Marvel things, DC things, anything, except for Batman. I love Batman so much. And so I read a review about this again, like it was like several months, maybe even a year ago at this point. Who knows? 2020 is an elusive time. But yeah. I read about this review and people were like, oh yeah, this is like the best version of seeing Harley's backstory. And I was like, okay, all right, fine. I'll give it a go. I'll read it. And it was incredibly compelling. This version of Harleen is the first 3 issues, all combined together. And I just sat and I read it in one sitting because the issues are longer than your standard comic book. I feel like they're each like a full book length, or at least it felt like that when I was reading it. And like what I think I enjoyed so much about this is that in a lot of other things that have Harley Quinn and Batman lore, or not Batman, sorry, Joker lore, like it really plays up the romance a lot to the point where like viewers find it hard to believe because it's just so toxic, and it's so terrible and it's portrayed awful. And what I enjoy about this version of it is that it doesn't hold back the fact that, yeah, this is a toxic relationship. We are making this very clear to you that this is not healthy. But at the same time, the way it's written is still so incredibly seductive. Like, you read it and you're like, all right, yeah, I get why she's into the Joker. It makes sense. Like the Joker is kind of hot in it, and you're, again, that's like always something too that I'm like, when I'm watching or reading these other things, I'm like, okay, like the Joker doesn't even look attractive. Like, I don't understand like why this would happen. No, like this makes a beautiful argument as to like how somebody like her would fall in love with a madman like him. And so in that way you're just like, oh, I want more. I want to keep reading this because the romance here is so it was spicy. It was good. But like at the same time, like I appreciate the fact that they just tell you like, and she even knows herself a little bit that this is not like necessarily a good thing. Like she at the beginning of it when she's starting to like have her first interaction with the Joker and stuff like she herself is being tormented. Like she is miserable and depressed and she can't sleep and she's trying to cope with it and she can't and so she drinks. And so like she knows this isn't a good thing. But it's like almost like over time she falls into his charisma, but at the end, like, well, I won't say the end, I won't give a twist, but
yeah,
it was very well done. If you are all interested in Harley Quinn and if you really ship Harley Quinn and Joker and want some good romance stuff as far as that goes, yeah, this is definitely the one to read. And it was just, I love the artwork that's done in it. I tend to be a little bit of like an animation or an illustration snob. So I have a very specific style that like I really enjoy, and if it doesn't fall within like the realms of that style, like there's a good chance I will not enjoy or even bother to read something. And this one I enjoy the fact that like it's done kind of in your superhero style, but it's very very realistic as far as portrayals. I mean, everyone is pretty much gorgeous in this. I like the way that the panels showed up on the page. Like there's plenty of like full page spreads. So there's a lot happening going on. There's like little minute details that if you pay attention to, you're like, oh, that's so good. I can't believe they put that in there. And like again, I think it just displays this dichotomy of like romance and toxicity like so well. I think one of my favorite spreads is like giving like allusions to Alice in Wonderland, and she's dressed up kind of like a Queen of Hearts at one point, also kind of alluding to the fact that she's going to become Harley Quinn, and those are like her color schemes. And it's just like there's like all these roses everywhere. And it's just this very romantic-esque, like just it was just gorgeous. It was so beautiful. And again, you're like, oh, yep, I get it. I get why you like the Joker. He's a charmer. And Batman is portrayed like the bad guy in this because it's from her perspective that she is seeing through the Joker. And so it's interesting to also see Batman in that kind of light. So
interesting.
Yeah. Like, I mean, I think objectively he is still like the good guy. But she brings up some interesting points when it comes to like violence in a community and why is it okay for Batman to do these things but not the people of Gotham City? Why, you know, are they punishing these criminals like when really like she believes that they need to be reformed and not just being punished. So it actually, there's a lot of social issues too that come into play, which again I'm like, oh yeah, snaps to that. So this just came out last year, these 3 issues, and I really hope that the next ones are either out or they're coming out and that they'll get put on Hoopla soon because I will definitely read them when they do.
Well, it's a beautiful cover. I've been staring at it like the entire time.
Yeah, if you just Google Harleen, like you'll see so many of the spreads. And again, they're all just like, they're so compelling and beautiful to look at. Like they're ones that I would hang up as posters, honestly, because they're just like,
oh wow, nice.
They're beautiful. They really are. But yeah, so that's Harleen. That is the comic that I read. And I don't read comics very often, so this is exciting.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. So yeah, no, I always, Joker and Harley Quinn were always very they're intriguing. You always like they're very in a very intriguing relationship, but as you get older you're like, man, this is not healthy.
Yeah,
because I remember watching it at like cartoons as a kid and being like, oh, the Joker and Harley, and now like, oh, you get older and you're like, oh no.
Yeah, I was talking about this to a friend of mine, and she brought up the Batman animated series, like their version of this story, which is they're pretty similar actually, except for of course the kids' TV show like keeps it very, very minimum, gives you a very brief overview, and certainly does not have all the sultry romance in it. Which again, I feel like I keep emphasizing that, but like it was so well done. I couldn't believe like how much like I was falling for the Joker as I was reading it.
Sultry Joker.
Sultry romance. Joker. Yeah, if you want the hot Joker this holiday season, check out Harleen.
Hey, well, moving on from sultry Joker to Lovecraftian eldritch horrors.
Oh, yeah.
Which, you know, I guess they kind of fit together. So I listened to this. I actually listened to the audiobook of this. It's a novella, so listening to the audiobook, it's, I believe, less than 3 hours long. So it's not a long, you don't have to put in a lot of time to listen to it. It's called The Ballad of Black Tom by Victor LaValle, and it's read by Kevin R. Free. And I listened to it on overdrive because that's where I get all my audiobooks. And it is a retelling of one of H.P. Lovecraft's stories. And it's a retelling of The Horror at Red Hook. And that story is considered to be his most racist story. I don't know. Do you know a lot about H.P. Lovecraft?
No, I do not at all. I watched a play somebody wrote in college once, and that's it.
All right. So H.P. Lovecraft was not a good person. He was an anti-Semite, very racist, very bigoted. Basically, anybody who wasn't white, or male, actually, he had a thing. He was sexist as well. He had a thing. He had issues. But I mean, you know, and I know that, but it doesn't but I can appreciate the stories that he wrote that I like, and the mythos that he created, and his influence on later writers. Like, I can appreciate that, but also know that he wasn't a good person. But The Horror at Red Hook. So I decided, I was like, this is one of his stories I haven't read before, because I have read a lot of his stories. And I was like, I haven't read this one. I'll read it first, and then I'll listen to the audiobook. And especially because everyone's like I was looking it up, and everyone's like, this is his most bigoted story. This is, you know, like, everybody was saying that. And I was like, really? And so I read it, and I was like, yep. So it's basically, oh no, all these non-whites and foreigners. Like, that's basically what the story is about. It doesn't have, it's really not one of his best stories. It doesn't have a lot of his usual, like, eldritch horrors or, like, you know, interdimensional beings or anything. Basically, the only thing that is scary is people who aren't white. And yeah, like, that's the story. And I was like, okay. And so it's interesting to me, Victor LaValle is a Black man. He's a Black author. And he decided to retell this story from the point of view of a Black man. It's about, I think it takes place in the 1920s. So the main character is Tommy Tester. He's a Black hustler from Harlem. And hustler meaning, like, he will deliver things that people want for money. He pretends that he knows how to play the guitar really well, even though he doesn't, and, you know, gets money that way. He comes up with all different schemes to come up to raise money to help take care of his father, who can't work anymore. He's kind of disabled from being a bricklayer. And so that's basically, he's the main character. And he one day delivers this book to what you kind of get. She's like a witch. You're like, there's something up with this lady. He delivers it to her in Queens, I believe. It takes place in New York City, and he goes from different places. And it's interesting because it's in the 1920s, so Tommy, he mentions how Harlem is basically the only place that he can be after dark that's safe. Like, you know, as a Black man, you don't go to other parts of New York City, you know, at all. Or, like, after dark, you're just asking to get murdered. So, and because of delivering this book, he somehow gets, like, caught up in the circle of Robert Sweedom, which is an actual character in the actual, like, the Lovecraft story. He's a wealthy eccentric, and who is, like, likes to research into the occult, and people are concerned with him because he's this rich white man, Robert Sweedom, but he is, you know, like, hanging out basically with people from South Asia and Black people, and, like, you know, those. and they're like, there must be something wrong with him because, you know, why would you want to spend time with all these recent immigrants? And so it really does cleverly subvert the story to show that the monster in this story is like the white man's malice, and it turns the black man into a monster. And I liked that. I also liked that he expanded upon the story and brought in other aspects of the Lovecraftian mythos. Like they talk about the Sleeping King. If you've read Lovecraft and you know Lovecraft, you'll know what I'm talking about. The Sleeping King is dead but dreaming. The old ones, they summon Cthulhu. So I like how rather than just leave this, because like the original story didn't have any of the awesome, weird, you know, eldritch horrors or that, you know, feeling of dread really that Lovecraft was known for. And Victor LaValle really brought that into his retelling. You get that again. And the writing is very atmospheric. His description of the different parts of New York were excellent. And the reader, Kevin R. Free, he did a good job. He did different voices, so you could always tell who is speaking. And he did it with different accents based on where they're from. And so I just thought it was really good. It's way better than the original story. Like, way better. Not that I'm saying you shouldn't read H.P. Lovecraft, because a lot of his stories are good. But, you know, like if you want that to get the foundations of where a lot of the, like, you know, interdimensional beings, those things that are just so horrible your brain can't comprehend it. Like that was his thing. These things you can't look at it. You can't, your brain will just, you know, you can't, these old ones are just so awful. You just can't even, your brain just can't do it. You know, like it's beyond your understanding. And that's Lovecraft's, I think, real legacy is those kind of psychological and then also like terrible things that is in his stories. I mean, he has some really good stories. So I'm not saying don't read H.P. Lovecraft. Just don't read The Horror at Red Hook. It's not. I mean, unless you want to compare, I suppose. But yeah, the Ballad of Black Tom, I thought Victor LaValle did a really good job. It was very cleverly done to bring in to kind of, it's like pushes back against the bigotry in the original story to show that the black man may become a monster, but it's because of the white man's malice towards the black man. You know, he's pushed too far, kind of thing. So I really liked it. And so I highly suggest, if you want a quick listen, since like I said, it's a novella, so it's less than, I think, 3 hours long. And if you want a very atmospheric but also socially conscious horror story, I would definitely suggest checking out The Ballad of Black Tom.
Well, I also know, I haven't watched it yet, but that show Lovecraft Country just came out like this past year, recently, and so I feel like I remember hearing some reviews about that, and it sounds very similar as far as theme material goes between the two. So perhaps listeners, if you've seen that show, this also sounds like a book for you.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I haven't watched it, but I did see my brother was watching it, and he really liked it, Lovecraft Country, so I've heard it's a good show. But yeah, so if you like that show, I would definitely check out this book. It would be very similar.
Nice.
Yes.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah, so we'll move on to my thing, which is kind of completely different, because this is not actually scary whatsoever, but yet it is one of my Halloween traditions every year. So
it looks like it's supposed to be scary.
Oh yes, the marketing for it originally was entirely supposed to look creepy, but it's not. So
okay.
The movie is called House 2: The Second Story, and I know,
Ooh,
it's
how
clever.
clever.
I know, it's so great. And I first watched this in college after a friend of mine, he was like, "You need to watch this movie. This is like one of the best movies you'll ever see." And I was like, "Uh-huh. Okay, sure, I'll watch it." And let me tell you, as far as the definition of best, it may not quite fit that because, well, this is definitely a B grade movie at its finest. It is a film that I argue includes every possible genre in the spectrum. And if you need to know its ratings, Rotten Tomatoes, like the critics, give it an 8%. So it is,
Wow.
yeah, it's
Yeah, that's the
pretty,
best movie.
but the audience ratings are at 43%, and like I would give it like an 80-90% because I went into there kind of having a feeling like, okay, this is going to be weird, it's going to be wacky, and I'm ready for it. I am going to sit on this roller coaster of a film and just take it where it goes on this ride. It's
Yeah.
about this guy whose parents die when he's very young, and he grows up to like inherit their house, this huge mansion, and he goes in there and he starts unpacking all these things. He finds a scrapbook about his grandfather, and he's like, "Oh yeah, my grandfather is buried nearby," and there's this like magical crystal skull that he had that it supposedly had all these powers. And so then him and his friend decide, let's go dig up grandpa and find this skull. And that's like the first 15 minutes of the movie. And then it just launches you into the craziest story that you'll ever be on about the house and the secrets that lay hidden within this house. You have, again, I don't want to spoil too much because part of the joy of this film is not knowing what you're getting into and then just watching it and discovering it, knowing all along that it's going to be weird. Um, but I guess like I said, the hilarity ensues. It's meant to be a comedy with supernatural elements in there. And like I said, there is bits of like historical fiction, sci-fi, timey-wimey stuff. It's got moments of feel-good family film. There's the best character ever in cinema is in this. His name is I think Bill the Electrician, and it's I again like he only comes in like the second half of the movie, but this character alone could launch a spin-off series that's all about him and his adventures as an electrician. And he just has all the quips in hand for what to say. And again, like you watch this movie and you're like, okay, I know this is trash as I'm watching it, but at the same time, like this is actually kind of clever. Like this is really creative in what they've done here. And I'm a sucker. I'm a sucker for anything that people label as trash. But if I can see that there's like creative potential with that in the thought process, I'm like, okay, yeah, I love this movie. I love creativity so much that like nobody would have thought to make this movie except for these people. Now, like as you can tell, it's called House 2, the second story. So there is a House 1. However, I've never
that's
seen.
what I was wondering. I was like, is there a House 1?
Yeah, there is. I've never seen it. It's completely different in tone, completely different storyline. I really don't know why they're connected necessarily, except for they both deal with a house that is haunted in some way. But yeah, like this is definitely, like you said, like it's a movie that I watch every single Halloween just because I'm like, you know what? I'm in the mood for House 2. I always recommend it to all of my friends to watch, some of which are more thankful than others that they've now seen it. Um, it's one of those films you can't find in a lot of places, but however, you can find it on YouTube because it's that bad that nobody cares it's on there. So
Oh, okay.
yes,
It's a YouTube
yeah,
movie.
YouTube movie,
Nice.
definitely.
Gotcha.
And I just double checked tonight to make sure it's still on there, and yeah, it definitely is. So there's a small cult following for this film. But we are mighty. It is good. Go watch it. You can complain to me
Gotcha.
later if you hate it.
Yes. Everyone go watch the second House 2, the second story with Bill the Electrician. And then you can all message Shannon and be like, what was that?
Yes, please address all complaints. Attention, Shannon Barton, Kirkwood Public Library. I will field them all, and it'll be fine. I will just be honored you took the time to watch this film.
That's hilarious. Okay, well,
yeah, let's go on though to
something more serious.
Yeah.
We probably should have ended on House 2 because my movie is actually not as funny. It's not funny at all, really. So this is called The Witness. It is a documentary that you can find on Kanopy. It was also on Netflix for a while there. So I don't know if it still is. I originally saw it on Netflix and then I was like, oh, hey, it's on Kanopy. And I watched it again. So if you don't know me, I love true crime. I am a big true crime aficionado, and I have been since I was a child. I blame my mother. She likes it too. Anyway, so this documentary is about the Kitty Genovese case. Have you ever heard of Kitty Genovese?
I do not know very much true crime whatsoever. So please tell me all the things, enlighten me.
All right. So this documentary was made in, I think it came out in 2014. It was, the filmmaker followed around her brother, Bill. And so it's mainly his story, actually, about trying to find answers. But so she became famous for her death, unfortunately. In March 1964, she was murdered on the street in front of her apartment in New York City. And according to the New York Times at the time, 38 witnesses saw the attack, and it took place over a half an hour, and nobody did anything. So it became a symbol for apathy in America.
Oh my gosh.
How apathetic everyone had become to each other and to their neighbors. And so that is why she became famous. Also, one good thing that came out of her murder is the national 911 system. Back then, to call the police, you had to call the precinct. So you had to know, like, the number to the precinct and which precinct you needed to call.
What?
And so that's who you would call if you needed help. And so after the outcry, after her murder, they actually came up with 911. So that you only needed to know that to get in touch with emergency services, basically.
Wait, what year did this happen again?
March 1964.
That's insane to me that the 911 telephone number has not been out for that long. That's like 60 years, maybe?
Yeah, you used to have to know the number to the police department. Yeah.
Yeah, I can just imagine that, like, well, just, oh wait, you'd also have to be like by a payphone, and so you're just like, here, wait, please, don't kill me, let me call this
and
like
you'd have to know the number, and it was and it was before the internet too, because so you need the phone book or whatever, and yeah, I know, crazy, right?
Please, Mr. Serial Killer, do not kill me. I need to go grab the phone book first and call. Insert phone number here.
So basically, the documentary follows her younger brother, Bill. He was 16 in 1964 when she was murdered. He was 12 years younger than she was. And, like, she came from a pretty big family. And so it's following him wanting answers because the New York Times had recently published, like, a retraction saying that the story they had originally published about the 38 witnesses was incorrect, which it was. And that, and so they were like, that's not the whole story. And he's like, what? Because he had based everything his entire life on this fact that nobody had helped his sister. Like, he thought that nobody helped his sister, and he would not be one of those people who would just stand by and do nothing. So he enlisted in the Marines, went to Vietnam, and lost his legs.
Oh my god.
So, yeah, he lost his legs in Vietnam. So basically, it really is a story about him trying, looking for answers, what really happened to his sister, and if, his sacrifice that he made, like all the choices he had made his entire life, were like, based on a false assumption, basically.
Mm.
And so it's actually a really emotional documentary. Because, you also see her other siblings, like some of them are like, I don't understand why he can't let this go. I don't know why he's going so in depth. It was like, 50 years ago. She's not coming back. We got to let it go. And, and it also shows just like how it affects the family forever when one of your family members is murdered. It never goes away. It stays with you for the rest of your life. And I know that from watching a lot of true crime. That is, I think, part of why I watch it, to, bear witness for the families kind of thing. But anyway, so he goes investigating to find witnesses to the attack and what had happened. So they caught him. The murderer, Winston Moseley, was her killer. And they caught him only, I think, 5 days later because he was burglarizing a house, and they caught him that way. And then he just admitted it, basically. There's more to it than that, but he had just gone out because he wanted to murder somebody. He wanted to murder a woman, so he was out late driving around, and Kitty pulled up and parked in the parking lot kind of across the street from her building, and he happened to be there. And so he ran after her. He stabbed her several times in the street, and she was screaming. It woke lots of people up. That's where the 38 came from, because at least 38 people heard the screams. But most of them, they heard screams. They looked out their windows but didn't see anything. And so, and when they didn't see anything, they went back to bed. They didn't know what was going on. And then there's some people who saw, they couldn't tell that she was being stabbed, but there was like some kind of attack going on. And one man actually opened his window and yelled out and said, "Hey, you get away from there." And so Walter, like the murderer, Winston Moseley, ran off. And Kitty got up. She'd been stabbed, but not fatally, though one of her lungs was punctured, so she couldn't scream as loud. And she kind of braced herself and walked around the corner. And once the people in those apartments couldn't see her anymore, and they didn't see the man, a lot of them didn't do anything. They went back to bed. And when they were asked later why they didn't call the police, a lot of them said, well, we figured somebody else already did. And, or that it was a domestic dispute and we shouldn't get involved. But what happened was she went around the corner, managed to find a door that was unlocked, collapsed in that hallway. And Winston, he got in his car, backed it down the street, waited 10 minutes, realized nobody was coming to help. And he went back and finished her off in the hallway.
Oh my God.
Basically. Yeah. So, it's actually really horrifying murder. But she, also didn't so her brother always assumed she died alone, but she didn't, because her friend, actually came to her, and when she got a call in the middle of the night saying that Kitty had been attacked or something and where she was, and this friend ran down and basically held her till the ambulance got there. And so that was one thing, the family never knew that. All this stuff, they never knew these details. Certain people weren't even in the police report and all this stuff. And so it's a really good documentary, not just, and you don't want to just hear about the murder because, yeah, it was awful. But the nice thing is they talk about her life, because, yeah, her death overshadowed her life, but she was a person who had a full life. And in fact, that picture of her is a mugshot. The most famous picture of her, that the one they used in the newspapers, is actually her mugshot from when she got caught doing bets on games and stuff. She was like a bookie. And so she was an interesting person. She was queer, and lived with a woman. Back then, obviously, they kept it a secret, said they were roommates. And it's, and some of the most devastating parts of the documentary is when her brother goes and talks to her girlfriend of that time. She didn't want to be on camera, so you just hear the voices. They actually used animations for certain things in the documentary, which I thought was really nice to show what's like going on without showing it. And it was just, it's, you know, it's, I would highly recommend the documentary. It's very emotionally charged, but it does show how the press can sometimes get things wrong, and that can affect families, and it just, yeah. So anyway, that's The Witness. It's one of my favorite true crime documentaries. It's really well done, and also devastating. But yeah, I also know, if you want more information on the Kitty Genovese case, for those of you who are interested in true crime, I learned more about it from, it's a documentary series. You can watch it on Hulu. It's from Investigate Discovery, you know, the channel that's basically for true crime. It's called A Crime to Remember, and they do an episode on the Kitty Genovese case. So you learn more about her and everything through that. So also, it's just a really good series. So I guess I'll just plug that in here. So if you have Hulu, I'm totally look that up. Crime to Remember. So anyway, you know, with Halloween and everything, there with spooky things, I mean, yeah, we're kind of ending on a down note, but there's nothing scarier to me than being attacked randomly and feeling like nobody's coming to your aid. So yeah, so that's The Witness. You can watch it on Kanopy. Like I said, it's actually really good. And it's not just about her or about the murder, but it's also about all the people that were around it and how it affected them. So yay! We're a little over time. Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's okay. It's all right. We'll go ahead and we can kind of wrap up here. We'll go have a review our content that we had for this evening. So whether you like cannibals, zombies, toxic romance, reversal of racist stories, comedic supernatural films, or sad, poignant documentaries, we've got it all this holiday season for the spookiest time of the year. But the library also has some other things this time of year that are also kind of for those spooky audiences. We have for teens coming up this next week. We have 2 more sessions of our short story book club, which is taking short stories by Edgar Allan Poe, and then also having adaptations of those stories by a modern author. And we feature a story for each meeting, and we talk about it. It's a good time. It's a really cool anthology. So even if you are not a teen and you want to check it out, go ahead and place a hold on the book. It's worth a read. And we also have our teen virtual Halloween party happening next week, Friday on October 30th, because we know a lot of teens out there are not going to be able to have normal Halloweens as planned this year. And so the least we can do at the library is try to give you a little bit of that fun festivities. And we already have a good sized group that I think will be there. So if you also just want to like meet some other cool teens, it'll be a good time. And then for adults, we also have some things happening. So we have an evening with Poe that'll be happening this Thursday, which is where we will have an actual performer who will be reciting different works of Poe, which I think will be a really good time. You can sign up to get it's just going to be streamed on YouTube actually. So you can just go ahead, mark your calendar, and make sure you're ready to watch that on YouTube at 7. And of course, the spookiest thing of all this season, which is in fact we have we have the election coming up, and I know everybody is pretty much probably tired at this point of all the ads that we're seeing on TV, and we're ready for, you know, a sense of normalcy from that. But the library does indeed have we're notarizing ballots. So if you have your ballot that you need to send and you're afraid that it's not going to get there in time, well, don't worry. Like, come on in, let's get that ballot notarized, that way you can send it on its way for that early voting. So yeah, that's everything that we have for this evening. I'm very glad if any of you were watching out there, and if you aren't watching right now, then I'm sure you'll see us on YouTube, where all of our previous episodes are there for your viewing.
Yes, watch our previous episodes, and everyone have a nice, spooky but safe Halloween. And we'll see you next month in November for our next episode.
Indeed. Have a great evening, everybody.
Yep. Bye.